So what do you believe are the essential apologetics and ethical issues that the next generation of Christian medical professionals must be prepared to face? Well, I think for many medical professionals who are Christians, assisted dying is a really big issue. So in the UK, we've got a very strong push, well, across the British Isles, in fact, and many other jurisdictions already have laws on assisted dying, or they will be coming again soon. So I think thinking how we deal with that is really important. Thinking how we care for our patients in a situation where assisted suicide and euthanasia may be a reality is really difficult for Christians. But also thinking how we care for people who are dying when we don't just give in to their ideas that there is no hope and that we should actually end their life. That's one of the biggest things for us. I think questions of sexuality and gender are really important too, because in the UK we don't have an official ban on change-allowing therapy, but when same-sex marriage is legal and when it's culturally accepted, it's very difficult to speak differently or to advance a biblically different worldview or ethical view. So simply being able to say, this is what the culture says, but this is what I believe the Bible says, and this is how I operate that, while still showing that you are compassionate and understanding towards your patients and your friends and colleagues. That's a real challenge around gender and sexuality. I think also in abortion and other beginning of life care issues, it's very difficult to work as a pro-life doctor around beginning of life issues, because there isn't really much in terms of a culture that promotes that. Certainly if you're operating as an obstetrician and gynecologist, the Royal College of Obstetrics and Gynecology does not support you in having a pro-life perception. And it's okay as long as you don't have to get involved directly in that. But I think one of the real challenges that we face at the Christian Medical Fellowship and with other partners in this area is building a coalition of people who do value human life from its beginning and who can practice accordingly with that. You've written about how ideology sometimes trumps evidence in medical policy. Could you explain what you mean by this and why it matters for Christians engaging in public debate? Well, I think ideology is what drives us, and it's the narratives that form our views and what our values are. I guess that's our worldview, and our theology can also be our ideology as well. And we very much see that in areas of gender and sexuality, there is often a secular ideology that drives people, the idea that whoever you say you are, then that's who you are, even if biological reality is different. The idea that love is love, and that any kind of relationship, as long as it's consensual, is a good thing. And these are ideas that drive people, these are ideologies that drive people, and we see that even when there's evidence that actually this is not good for families necessarily, or evidence that transgender identities or same-sex attraction are not necessarily stable or enduring in the way that we're told they always are. People don't want to hear evidence that shows that abortion may be harmful for women and families. And people don't want to hear evidence that assisted suicide is actually not good for society or for the vulnerable. So I think these are all areas where people have an underlying worldview that drives them. It's often coalesced into an ideology, and they're more resistant to accepting evidence that is to the contrary. I think for Christians we have a similar problem often, in that we can come with preconceived views of our theological views or something else. Just because we're Christians doesn't mean that we necessarily have the best view on everything. We're based on the truth. Obviously we stand on the Bible, but there's lots of questions somehow that we can disagree on. And I think working out what that means and being willing to listen to people who differ from us and to look at evidence that sometimes might contradict a belief that we have, that's difficult for us as Christians, just like it is for secular people. So my hope and my prayer is that we can, I think, learn to express evidence in ways that connects with people, not just to assume that they're driven by ideology and that they won't listen. It can be difficult, but we need to persevere. And I think for Christians as well, we need to be able to listen well to people who disagree with us, both fellow Christians and others who are not Christians, and to listen to perhaps evidence that might contradict something that we believe, whether it's from our own theology or our biblical interpretation, or something else that goes on there. So I think learning to listen well, have good conversations, and to think, how does this evidence affect the belief that I have, is a great thing to be thinking about. So as Chief Executive of CMF, the Christian Medical Fellowship, you've been involved in advocacy at a national level. What lessons in leadership can you pass on to present and future Christian leaders who may face hostility when they stand for biblical ethics? Well, I think one thing certainly to keep in mind is that just because people disagree with you, that doesn't mean that you're wrong or on the wrong path. Very often in the Christian life, we're called to persevere, even though people are disagreeing with us, or we may face hardship along the way. So being faithful is really important. I think being humble is really important too. And I've seen many situations when Christian leaders can get locked into the I am being faithful and therefore anyone who disagrees with me must be wrong, even when it's a fellow Christian. I think that can be problematic, and I think we need to be able to keep humility that actually we could be wrong about certain things, and people that we disagree with may be right, even if partially. So being able to have those kind of productive conversations, particularly with people who are mostly on the same side with us, even if not completely. That's a really important thing that I've seen many times, sadly, how Christian organizations and people of different theologies can, or strategies can end up fighting for a long time about something when actually there could be a way through these things. So I would certainly encourage people, yes, to be faithful, yes, to persevere, but also to be humble and to listen well and to think, could this person have a point, even if I don't agree with them completely? I think also to make sure that that humility shines out in the way that we deal with people. Even when we do disagree profoundly with people, they're still people made in the image of God. I work in prisons and other kind of secure environments. I see a lot of people who've done a lot of bad things, whose example I would not want to follow in life. And yet, when you look hard, you can almost always see the image of God there, that essential dignity and value shining out. And that's something we can encourage. I think it's something we can draw out by the way that we treat people, and to show that essential dignity, and often to give them a better example of how to live their life. We need definitely to do that with our opponents, our ideological opponents, and sometimes with just the people who maybe annoy us a little bit. I think it's always too easy to get a bit, how shall we say, a bit too robust with people, and we need to keep that soft edge even when we're standing firm on something important. Thank you.